Welcome to your deep dive, and this time we're tackling the Mongolian language. Buckle up, it's gonna be a wild ride.
It sure is. We're talking about a language that's as vast and dynamic as the steppes themselves.
I loved how the source material kept saying the Mongol language.
Right.
Like, come on, guys. They
Yeah.
told me right away that that's not the whole story. So let's clear that up for our listeners right off the bat. What's the deal with this whole Mongol language thing?
It's a common misconception. It's more accurate to think in terms of Mongolic languages, like branches on a family tree, each with its own unique character and history.
Okay, a family tree of languages. I'm intrigued. But before we go branching out too far, give me a sense of scale here. Just how many people are we talking about when we talk about speakers of these Mongolic languages?
You might be surprised to learn that there are actually quite a few, somewhere between 5 and 6 million speakers.
Wow, that's way more than I would have guessed. So where are all these speakers? Is this purely a Mongolian affair, or are we casting a wider net?
Think vast stretches of East and North Asia. Obviously, you've got Mongolia itself. But then there's Inner Mongolia, a region of China with a significant Mongolian-speaking population. And it doesn't end there. You'll even find pockets of Mongolian speakers in places like Xinjiang and Qinghai.
So we're talking a pretty significant chunk of the Asian continent. That's wild. Let's talk about Inner Mongolia for a sec. I imagine the linguistic landscape there is a bit more, shall we say, complicated.
You hit the nail on the head. This is where that whole language versus dialect debate rears its head.
Yeah, I was wondering when that was going to come up.
It's a classic linguistic conundrum. For example, take Buryat and Orit languages, spoken in parts of both Russia and China. Are they truly distinct languages, or are they closer to dialects of a broader Mongolian language? It's a question that has linguists going back and forth.
That's what I loved about the source material. They basically just said, yeah, nobody really agrees on that one.
Exactly. It's a linguistic gray area, and that's what makes it so fascinating. There's evidence to support both sides of the argument, which just goes to show you that language is rarely black and white. It's fluid, adaptable, and always evolving.
It definitely keeps things interesting. Speaking of fascinating linguistic quirks, can we talk about the Mongolian writing system? I'm ready to dive into this whole writing system thing because I know, at least visually, there are some really interesting scripts there.
Oh, absolutely. It's a bit of a journey. You see, the way Mongolian is written has changed over time, kind of mirroring the history of the language and the people.
Take me back to the beginning. Where do we even start with Mongolian script?
Well, we could actually start with a bit of a mystery, to keep things interesting.
Ooh, I love a good mystery. Lay it on me.
So there's a chance, and I'm really emphasizing chance here because, frankly, the evidence is scant, that really early Mongolian, like way back to the Xianbei languages,
Okay.
might have used some kind of runic script.
Whoa.
Yeah, imagine that. Ancient Mongolian runes. But sadly, we just don't have enough solid proof to say for sure.
Ugh, talk about a linguistic tease. I'm dying to know more, but I guess we'll have to stick to what we do know. So tell me about that traditional vertical script, because I have to say, it's visually stunning.
Oh, it's absolutely gorgeous. It's called the traditional Mongolian script. And yeah, as unique as it is beautiful. The way it flows vertically down the page with those intricate ligatures connecting the letter. It's almost like calligraphy.
Yeah, it's mesmerizing.
And the story behind it is pretty cool, too. It was actually adopted as the official script by Genghis Khan himself way back in 1204.
Of course it was. Leave it to Genghis Khan to make sure even the writing system was epic. But why that particular script? Was it just about aesthetics, or was there a more strategic reason behind his choice?
Well, Genghis Khan was all about consolidating his power.
Can't imagine him settling for anything less.
Exactly. And as he was building this vast empire, he needed a unified way to communicate across it. That traditional Mongolian script, with its unique look and those intricate characters, it was perfect for the task.
It's like this visual representation of Mongolians' journey through time. But hold on a sec. If that script worked so well for so long, why even try to change things up in the 20th century?
You're right, it did work well.
I remember reading about those attempts to introduce a Latin-based alphabet. What was that all about?
You're right on the money. Not just once, but twice they tried to make that shift to a Latin-based script. First in the 1930s, then again in the 1940s.
Twice! They were really pushing for that Latin alphabet, weren't they? What was the thinking there? Why try to fix something that wasn't broken?
Well, like most things, it all boils down to politics.
Ah, politics, of course.
Right. So In the 20th century, the Soviet Union had a huge influence in that part of the world, and they were really pushing for Cyrillic, the script used for Russian.
Makes sense. Easier to exert influence when everyone's on the same page, or at least using the same alphabet.
Exactly. So they leaned pretty hard on Mongolia to adopt Cyrillic as their official writing system.
And I'm guessing that pressure worked.
It did. So that's why Cyrillic is the main script you'll see in Mongolia today.
Wild to think about those centuries of this beautiful, traditional, vertical script, and then boom, Cyrillic comes along. I mean, I get why they did it, but do you think that shift had any other impact beyond just, changing the way words looked on a page?
It actually had a huge impact on literacy rates. See, Cyrillic, it's a bit more phonetically aligned with spoken Mongolian than the traditional script was.
Oh, interesting. So it was easier to learn.
Way easier. And the numbers speak for themselves. Between 1941 and 1950, literacy in Mongolia shot up from something like 17% to over 70%.
Wow, that's incredible. That's like a linguistic leap forward.
Right. Talk about the power of a writing system.
Absolutely. It's like each script tells its own story about Mongolian, its history, its speakers. But let's shift gears a bit here and talk about how Mongolian actually sounds. One of the things that I found fascinating while I was reading through all the materials you sent was this concept of agglutination.
Agglutination?
Yeah. I have to be honest with you, I'm not entirely sure I fully grasp what that means. It sounds intimidating.
It's not as scary as it sounds. Think of agglutinative languages like the Lego masters of the language world.
Okay, I'm listening. I love a good Lego analogy.
So you know how in English we use separate words for a lot of things, like prepositions or verb tenses?
Right, right.
Well, in agglutinative languages, they have these little units of meaning called morphemes. It's kind of like those Lego bricks you were talking about.
Right.
And they can just keep adding them together to create these big, complex words.
So instead of saying, like, to the house with 3 separate words, you might have one word in Mongolian that's made up of a bunch of different morphemes all stuck together.
You got it. And perhaps the coolest example of this agglutination thing in Mongolian is vowel harmony. It's a real mind bender in the best way possible.
Vowel harmony! I've definitely heard that term thrown around, but I'll be honest, I'm a little fuzzy on the details.
Basically, vowel harmony means that all the vowels within a word have to, harmonize with each other, right?
Okay.
They got to belong to the same group. So, if a vowel at the beginning of a word belongs to a certain club, all the other vowels that come after have to be in that same club too. Even the vowels and suffixes and prefixes will change to match.
I'm going to need an example because my brain's starting to hurt a little bit.
Of course. So let's say you're talking about a book.
Okay.
The word for book in Mongolian is nom.
Nom.
Got it. Now, if you wanted to say my book, you'd add the suffix minin.
Okay.
But because nom has that O sound, the suffix changes to min to harmonize with it.
Ah, so it becomes nom.
Precisely. Vowel harmony in action.
That's pretty wild. Like those vowels are having a little party, making sure their outfits all match.
That's a great way to put it.
And on top of this whole vowel harmony thing, Mongolian also has those crazy consonant clusters.
Oh, yeah. Don't forget about the consonant clusters. They're like little groups of consonants that like to hang out together and make these unique sounds that you don't really hear in a lot of other languages.
So we've got these clusters of consonants making unusual sounds. We've got vowels changing their sounds to match each other. What's the overall effect? How does this all come together to create the sound of Mongolian?
It creates this incredibly unique rhythm and flow. Vowel harmony makes it melodic.
Okay.
And then those consonant clusters add a certain texture, a complexity that's really interesting to the ear. It's a language that really draws you in and keeps you guessing.
I love that. Now, shifting gears one last time because we're running out of time. I know English is a notorious borrower, always picking up words from other languages. But in getting ready for this episode, I noticed that Mongolian has borrowed quite a few words too.
Oh, for sure. Mongolian's borrowed words tell a story about its history and its interactions with other cultures. We're talking everything from Old Turkic and Sanskrit to, in more recent times, Russian and even some English.
Wow, it's like a linguistic tapestry woven from threads of all these different languages. Any examples come to mind?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the Mongolian word for religion, which is shashin, that one comes from Sanskrit, and baishin, which means building, can be traced back to Persian.
It's fascinating how these borrowed words are like little windows into the past, showing us how Mongolian has evolved over time.
It's like each loan word is carrying a little bit of history with it.
Exactly. It's incredible to think that even now, all these years later, Mongolian is still changing, still adapting, still picking up new words and sounds from the world around it. We've covered so much ground today, from debunking the myth of a single Mongol language to exploring the evolution of its writing system, the intricacies of its grammar, and even its habit of borrowing words from other languages.
It's been quite a journey.
It really has. A huge thank you to our resident expert for guiding us on this linguistic adventure.
My pleasure. Always happy to talk about languages.
And to our amazing listeners, as always, thank you for tuning in. We hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into the fascinating world of the Mongolian language. It's a language that's as rich and complex as its history, and we encourage you to keep exploring all its wonders. Until next time.